This is KCCK's Culture Crawl. My name's Dennis Green, and my guests today are from the upcoming Mirrorbox Theatre production of a play called Orange Julius. We have Kevin Hallman, who is the artistic director and director of this show, and Ellie Dasautels, who is in the show as the character Nut. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, we'll talk a little bit about your role and about the production, your background too.
Of course.
In just a minute. But Kevin, let us start with the short synopsis of Orange Julius. To start with, I know it's an Iowa premiere.
Yes.
Like everything Mirrorbox does, you're bringing shows to the community for the very first time. What attracted you to Orange Julius?
I love plays that use dream logic. And there's this great idea that the playwright David Mamet came up with, and he said the greatest dramas are like dreams in that they approach an unanswerable question. And this play is both structured in a very dreamy kind of way. It poetically moves between fantasy and reality. And it also deals with this unanswerable question of how can a child ever really know their parent, and how can they ever really be known? And that both need to connect and the recognition of the difficulty of it.
And the character of Nut in the play is coming to take care of, or with your dad who's a Vietnam vet. Am I getting this correct?
Yeah. So it's basically a Nut is it's kind of reliving memories of their childhood and their past, as well as their experience being home while their father is sick and taking care of their father with their family.
Okay,
and they're they're just grappling with their experience and what they wish they had talked about with their dad, and what they wish their dad talked about with them, and feeling like, oh, I was misunderstood and I never had that chance to be understood. And so he's kind of my character, not I use he and they interchangeably. He is really kind of trying to like relive these memories, but also sort of rewrite them to kind of try to get it right this time. Yeah.
And their father is ill. The orange in Orange Julius, is that Agent Orange?
It is
Agent.
It is Agent Orange. So Nut's father his name is Julius, and he was exposed to Agent Orange as a soldier in Vietnam. And kind of the major fantasy part of what's happening in the play is that Nut is projecting themselves into a fantasy version of Vietnam where they are a soldier along with their father, Julius.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's sort of like an escapism kind of coping mechanism, because with all the reliving comes a lot of overwhelming emotions, and I think it's a lot of emotions that they don't know how to deal with. And so when it gets too hard, they'll switch into this, Vietnam fantasy with their dad, because it's like, okay, and now I want to be with my dad. Let me just get to this place where I can just be with dad and be who I want dad to see me as.
Ellie, tell me a little bit about your background. I know you come to us from a pretty big gig. You were on the NBC show Rise.
Yes.
Which was not long ago. It's in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah,
Yes?
well, we actually had only one season, and that was in 2018, the spring of 2018 is when it premiered. That was a fantastic experience.
Yeah. So tell me where you grew up and how the
Sure.
acting bug bit you, and just give me the Ellie story.
Okay, cool. So I'm actually from Connecticut. That's where I was born, and that's where I grew up. I went to school at Manhattanville College. My sophomore year, I realized I wanted to do theater, so I stayed an extra year to complete that. And I knew pretty much going into the theater department, into the theater major, that I was doing it mainly with the goal to go into film and TV. But we didn't have a film and TV major. I would have done that, but we had theater. So, but I did fall in love with theater completely. And around my fourth year, because I think that was supposed to be my senior year, I found managers and I started auditioning. And then towards the end of my fifth year, I was cast in the pilot for Rise, which was at the time called Drama High. The show was inspired by a book called Drama High, written about a real life teacher who he was an English teacher. He became a drama teacher at this school in Pennsylvania. It was a very rundown kind of town, very blue collar, and they always did like regular plays like Grease, or little things like like basic plays, basic musicals, and he wanted to shake things up, and so he was really the start of high schools doing more provocative plays. And so their high school, the high school that they in Levittown, I'm blanking on the name, but so they kind of were the experimental high school, where that's where they did so Rent for high school theaters, they did it first, and so they kind of were the experiment, like, how do we do this and adapt it for high school? And so he became a pretty famous guy, that Lou Volpe, that's his name.
Even though the show only lasted one season,
Yeah.
it had to be just a amazing foundational experience for you.
Oh my God, yeah. Well, I played a transgender teenage boy named Michael, and yeah, it was fantastic because my character was one of the first trans characters that I ever, experienced or saw or whatever, being happy and being just, trans, and that being totally fine with everybody. And so like you got this really happy, trans teenage story. Yeah. And he was accepted. He, found this troupe of theater kids and found where he fit.
You say that that's the first time you had that experience of seeing a transgendered character happy as a non-gender or a non-binary person.
Yeah.
Growing up, and this has a somewhat of a role in this play and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to talk to me just a little bit about that?
Yeah, about my identity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I figured out that I was non-binary in college when I, started dating my now fiance. We kind of figured out our transness together. And I had such a wonderful experience figuring out my identity, and a lot of people don't have that privilege to have a wonderful experience with that. And I was so lucky that my family is super accepting and welcoming, and they wanted to know me and they wanted to get it. And so I have a great family. So being a trans actor is super important to me because we really need the representation. Like, I think that me being non-binary and my face being on TV is like, oh, that's a non-binary person. And like, people can see themselves in me, and especially and in theater as well. And I think it's important that trans people play trans characters for as long as it takes to kind of like rewrite everything, in representation that wasn't really done well. So I am super happy that I am in this place in my life that I can be the representation that I think a lot of people need.
You make a great point in that that it's important because obviously people's journeys, we see, there's emotion, there's a lot of times there's sadness, there's tragedy,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also people who have good experiences in transitioning, and
Mm-hmm.
we need both.
Yes,
you need
of
to see
course.
people who have trouble, but then you also need to see people who found acceptance,
Of course.
and are okay.
Yes, and that's what's so awesome about Nut in Orange Julius is that we don't get this transition story that is often so overdone. It's Nut is Nut, and we talk about Nut talks about gender in nuanced ways, because I mean, being trans is not a linear experience. It's very, very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very nuanced. It's very complex. You don't figure it out all at once,
And it never ends.
Exactly. You're
Like,
always
like anybody, we're always
Yeah.
discovering our identity.
Exactly. And so I think that it's a wonderful thing that, this play shows a non-binary character or a trans masculine character, going through a grieving process for their dad. And it doesn't really have to do with them being trans, but of course that's part of their story.
Talking with Ellie and Caven about Orange Julius coming up at the Mirrorbox Theatre. Well, we've dove into some fairly weighty issues here, and it sounds like there's a lot of meat to this play, but I'm guessing, too, there are some lighter moments to bring a little bit of relief to people as they, look at all this stuff going on, yes?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that Ellie was talking about in terms of complexity, I think that goes along with painting a great dramatic picture of anyone's life. So that complexity absolutely comes into play in terms of the balance between this really tragic situation of losing a parent, but also there are these great moments of family bonding and joy and seeing really this complex 360-degree view of how this one family deals with life and loss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's definitely nothing black and white about grieving. You know, there's often laughter and, you know, laughter and joking as coping mechanisms as well. And but it's nice in those moments because it's just bliss and it's remembering. Yeah.
The play is Orange Julius, coming up at Mirrorbox Theatre at Legion Arts at CSPS Hall. How do people get tickets, Caitlin?
They can get tickets at the CSPS box office, which is open from 10 to 6 weekdays, and they can also buy tickets in advance at legionarts.org.
Well, thanks so much for coming in. Good luck. It just sounds like a wonderful, meaty, emotional show that'll leave us all thinking about our own lives and relationships, which is what great drama is all about.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Thanks so much for being here.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio most weekdays at 10:20, or download the podcast, watch or listen on your own schedule using your favorite podcast app or at kcck.org/culture. I'm Dennis Green.